The pitcher's mother thinks that the strike zone is as big as a Kenworth. The batter's mother thinks the strike zone is a tuna can.
I've always had the philosophy that your job as a hitter is to hit the ball. One of the years that I was coaching, we had swing the bat or don't pick it up. If you get called out watching an outside corner pitch and you're like, but it was a ball, your job up there as a batter is to hit that ball and hit it opposite field. So if it's outside, so far outside, or it almost hits you in the head and it gets called a strike, I mean, that doesn't happen. So I always teach the kids to be aggressive.
Okay, so Umpire Coaching is a free podcast for youth baseball and softball umpires and coaches. I'm James, and with me here is Roger. How's it going, Roger?
Going good.
Appreciate you being with me on this journey. Tell us a little about yourself so people can get some idea about what you have to offer.
Well, I've played various lower roles in baseball life. I'm a parent. I've umpired since around 2013, coached some. Sometimes I've been good at any of those things, and sometimes I've been bad, probably especially as a parent. It's just been a learning experience and something that I've really grown in the last 5 years.
Awesome. If you're a volunteer coach or umpire and you're looking for help, maybe you're going to go behind the plate for the first time tomorrow. Maybe you've got some kids that you're trying to teach a technique to. This is the place. We're here for rules questions. We're here to clear up things that may not make any sense. You've come to the right place if you're interested in coaching and umpiring. Each episode, what we're going to do is we're going to pick a specific topic or a rule or a group of topics and rules, and then discuss how the interpretations of those rules can help us as umpires to enforce them in a game. And then on the other side, the coaching side, just about every rule in the book has a strategic advantage if used correctly. So we're going to talk about that stuff and how to help these kids get the most out of their baseball game. I'm James. I'm a volunteer coach and umpire. I've been doing it since 2002. Having been a umpire-in-chief, a UIC, at a Little League for well over a decade now. It's interesting. Every year I get the same 6, 8, 10 questions. Every year, never fails. I always get the same questions. And like I said before, in the last 20 years, I've met some it's just outstanding coaches and umpires who have greatly influenced me in my career. Before we get started here, I need to remind everyone that this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please check out the disclaimer in the transcript of this blog, or just wait for us to read it at the end of the podcast. But we're here to have a good time. And so the first topic that we're going to do is one that's kind of near and dear to my heart. And this is something that a lot of people don't understand. You would think they would, but many don't. And so the first topic for our first podcast is, what is a strike?
Well, that should be easy.
Yeah. Well, trust me, it's not. So many people don't understand what a strike is. There's so much information out there that just isn't accurate. And a lot of times it comes from watching Major League Baseball on TV, where they show a two-dimensional plane to represent a three-dimensional plane, and that isn't accurate. So yeah, there's confusing information out there. And, I thought in this podcast, let's go to the source. Let's talk to some umpires that might know a little something about what is a strike. And then we'll talk to some coaches and talk about what they have to say, and perhaps some strategies or things that can help a kid or a team succeed in the game of baseball. So we're talking to what I would consider quite a distinguished group of umpires today. And what's interesting about them is we have a couple who are professor level, who have decades of experience over thousands of games, and they're going to share some of their thoughts with us today. And then we have another umpire who is a mentor level with 20 plus years of experience. He definitely has mentored me in my career. And then we have myself and Roger and someone else here who's going to introduce himself, who's a journeyman level umpire. So we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll start with Nick. What can you tell us about yourself, Nick?
The coming Little League season will be my 37th as an umpire and also as a manager, a coach. As far as any training that I've attended, I've been to the week-long academy in Western Region for 4 different times. I've attended and presented numerous local clinics. I've been selected to work regional tournaments 3 different times, and I was selected to work 2 different World Series. Big league softball and senior softball.
Brent?
Been umpiring a long time. I started umpiring when I was attending high school. Somewhat took a break during my college years, but when my son got involved with Little League, I sort of got back into it.
Greg?
I've been a Little League volunteer for about 15 years, and I've been umpiring for about the last 10 or so. Had the privilege of getting to work in a few tournaments and a lot of district all-star games. That's probably the best training you can have, and I'm planning on going to the Little League Umpire Academy next month, which I'm looking forward to.
And Darrin?
I've been umping for about 21, 22 years. I always lose track. The skill levels all the way down to 8-year-olds and up as high as 18-year-olds for high school softball.
So our first question, and again, what is the exact definition of a strike in the book?
Well, as you said, you basically go down through the book definition, which is struck at by the batter and missed, is struck at if any part of the ball passes through the strike zone, is fouled by the batter when there are less than 2 strikes. And that's a unique one to think about, because after 2 strikes, it's not a strike. It's a foul ball. So anyhow, is bunted foul on the 3rd strike. If they bunt foul, they are out. Touches the batter's person as the batter strikes at the ball. And in fact, anytime a pitch ball hits a batter or runner, and that you have to go to the upper divisions, in the vicinity of home plate, it's a dead ball. Anyhow, it touches the batter in flight in the strike zone and also becomes a foul tip.
Okay, excellent. And where can people find that in the book?
It's basically under Rule 2 definition in the Rulebook.
Well, in my mind, is a pitch that flies through a magic 5-sided box over home plate, which is situated between the batter's knees and armpits when they take a natural batting stance.
My personal definition of a strike is a pitch that leaves a pitcher's hand and can basically, it will be a strike until proven otherwise.
There's a couple of things that I want to highlight. You know, it's a short definition in the rule book, and it says that the strike zone is that space over home plate. That's a key part right there. It's always over home plate. It doesn't matter if the batter moves up in the batter's box or moves back in the batter's box. The strike zone is always over home plate. And now that tells us that it takes the shape of home plate. Now, the height of the strike zone, if we go on further in the definition, says that it's between the batter's armpits and the top of their knees when the batter assumes a natural stance. We're talking about a 3-dimensional space that is magically suspended in the air and is as tall as from the batter's armpits to the top of their knees. The definition finishes up by saying that the umpire shall determine the strike zone according to the batter's usual stance when the batter swings at a pitch. Then the batter will flex their knees a little, maybe bend a little at the waist. That's bringing their armpit down a little bit. And then when they actually swing at a pitch, they may take a short stride. They may flex their knees a little more, which is going to drop their armpit maybe even a little more. And that is where we set the top limit of the strike zone. Sometimes you get a kid who's going to come up there and he's going to try to erase his strike zone by squatting down. His chest is just about sitting on his knees. Well, that you should not call that strike zone. If you're quick acting enough, you might even ask the kid, hey, Jimmy, why don't you step back and show me your home run swing? Well, once they do that, now you know where their strike zone is.
Could we maybe discuss a little bit about what is not a strike so people understand the difference and it helps them understand what that is? And I realize this is a really simple question, but it is amazing to me how many people don't really get it. They don't. And so if you could just expand a little bit about maybe some things you've heard or some misconceptions about what a strike is and is not.
A lot of times the misconception, and coaches and managers have a hard time with, especially at the lower divisions, well, even sometimes at the majors and above divisions, if a catcher sets up deep and the batter's in the back of the box and the ball ends up in the ground, that isn't necessarily a ball. It isn't ball just simply because the ball touched the ground right in front of the catcher's mitt. It's where was it when it crossed over the plate.
Hey there. You're listening to the Umpire Coaching Podcast on umpirecoaching.com. I'm James. We got Roger with me and a bunch of umpires, and we're talking about what's a strike.
So would you ever, like, obviously there's the rule, but then like when you're like doing like either a 9-year-old game or you're doing a very novice, let's say juniors game, how much do you, or would you expand, or would you change your strike zone at all if it was like a skill level was not there?
That's a great question, and I'll answer it by this. At the start of a game, I like to think of pitchers as doing no wrong. I like to think strike, strike, strike as it's leaving their hand, and even if it's close as it's crossing the plate. And the reason I believe that is pitchers are psychological, and whatever the skill level, whatever the age level, if I can come out with what would be considered probably a big zone and they can throw strikes, there is this phenomena that takes place throughout the game that they might be getting wide or high or low strikes early, but as their confidence swells, they tend to throw more strikes naturally after that, as opposed to being an umpire who comes out and my strike zone is as big as 1970s ashtray.
Our ultimate goal is to try to get a message to the offense that I'm calling strikes. You better swing the bat. Once they start swinging the bat, there's going to be contact. And now kids are playing ball. If all we're doing is calling balls back there, there's only 2 players involved in the game, just the pitcher and the catcher. Those other 7 players out there on defense, they may as well go sit in the dugout. If we're calling more strikes, the pitcher is going to gain confidence and relax, and they're going to start just pitching the ball, not trying to aim it. The batters are swinging the bat, and like I said, now we're playing ball. Everybody's having fun. Fans are cheering. The plate umpire is out of the game. You're not getting moaned and groaned at for.
I really like what you said about taking the umpire out of the game. That's the first thing I've told both of my boys when they've complained about an umpire strike zone. Is I say, your job is to take as a hitter, take the umpire out of the game, hit the ball, and it doesn't matter how bad or good the strike zone is, because you're doing your job. And now as they've gotten older and they're pitching more, again, I go back to that same thing where they're talking about, hey, I'm not getting the strike zone called. I'm like, hit the bat with the pitch. I mean, give the hitter something to hit. Just make sure they're hitting it off the end of the bat or off the hands, right? But make them make contact.
As an umpire, if anybody ever asks you, you tell them it's what's in the book. However, the kids really aren't getting anything out of it. The players aren't getting anything out of it by setting the bat on their shoulder and not swinging at anything. So at the lower divisions, the managers and coaches really need to teach their batters, what type of pitch do you like to hit? And if it's there, swing at it. Don't be looking for a walk, be looking to hit the ball.
Yes, I have to adjust my zone to the level of pitchers that I'm seeing on a particular day, as well as for a particular age group, as well as where we are regular season versus tournament play. My district zone is probably going to be different than my state zone. My state zone is probably going to be different than my regional zone, and so on. And some people say, how do you do that? How do you gain consistency? I don't know. I don't get a lot of cat calls when I'm umpiring. So I think whatever I'm doing tends to favor being beneficial towards pitchers.
The pitcher's mother thinks that the strike zone is as big as a Kenworth. The batter's mother thinks the strike zone is a tuna can. What I think for anybody that's umpiring in Little League, I think you have to realize the skill level of the players that you're working with and adjust your style accordingly. If I'm doing a minor, if somebody twists my arm and makes me do a regular season minors game, for example, in all likelihood, most pitches that, in my judgment, the batter can hit are probably going to be called strikes.
Exactly. So let's talk about, as an umpire, the slot in, we can discuss a little bit about feet position and things like that. But I think, a lot of people who are just starting out as umpiring and maybe they haven't been to any sort of clinic, a lot of people don't really understand why we don't stand directly behind the catcher with our head above his head.
Well, the main reason we do not position, one of the main reasons we don't position ourselves over the top of the catcher is that we no longer have big league. But in big league, when you have that close to 100-mile-an-hour fastball that barely tips off the batter's bat and goes directly over the catcher's head, you don't want to be there. And that's where most foul balls go, is somewhat over the catcher's head or to the right on a right-handed batter. And that's why you get your head and your body in the position between the batter's feet and the plate. That is basically where your head sits.
I've been taught two ways about the slot, and trust me that the slot is the only way to go. I've been taught the deeper the slot, the better. And I've also heard out of the words of Jerry Davis himself that he likes to set his nose up on the inside edge. And anything, if it's a right-handed batter in his left eye, he would ball. Anything that hits his nose or to his right eye on the inside would always be a strike. He likes to keep his eyes set at about the limit of the upper end of his strike zone. So he's got half the strike zone figured out as the pitch is coming in. The difference between Jerry Davis and myself is Jerry's looking at the best pitchers in the world. I'm looking at kids that are coming out. This Saturday's game might be their World Series, and I'm trying to do my best to work with their best and not get hit and not get beat up. So I still tend to cheat and keep my nose on the inside. But if I've got a catcher that's questionable, I will tend to move more towards the batter and kind of use the batter as one more element of protection.
Well, that's a good concept.
My eyes always being, I try to keep my chin no lower than the top of the catcher's helmet. Softball's a little different. I can set up a little lower in softball as long as I can still see that outside corner, because softballs tend to rise and baseballs tend to fall. So that's the main reason why I can get away with a little bit lower head height between softball and baseball. And then I set my nose up across the plate. My nose goes across the far corner at the front, yet my eyes are focused on the pitcher and always seeing the release of the ball all the way to where the ball meets the plate or to the batter's bat, whichever takes place.
The slot is that area between the batter and the catcher. You want your head to be at the slot so that you have an unobstructed view of the outside corner. That pretty much gives you a view of the whole plate. You get that outside corner where pitchers make their money. So in order to get there, there are 3 heel-toe relationships to kind of get you started on it, guidelines. Number 1, your slot foot, that's the foot that's closest to the batter. Try to get it out to where it lines up with the heels of the batter when he's in the box. That same slot foot, you want to line up your toes with the catcher's heels. And then your other foot, you want that toe to line up with your slot foot heel. And your other foot that's behind the catcher should be turned out a little bit, maybe pointing towards about the second baseman. That will turn your hips just a little bit so that you're more not squared up to the pitcher, but squared up to the plate. And then your head height, your chin, should be no lower than the top of the catcher's helmet. If you get any lower, then you run the risk of the catcher's head blocking your view of a pitch and the plate. And then the last point is point your nose at the outside corner of the plate. You want to move your head as little as possible, but when that pitch is coming through the strike zone, you want to see it with both of your eyes, with binocular vision. If you're squared up to the pitcher, chances are pretty good you're going to be trying to look across the bridge of your nose, and you're going to see that pitch with only one eye, and that's going to affect your depth perception. So now, as you get a batter that crowds the plate and the catcher moves a little bit inside, how do you adjust? Well, it feels like what you want to do is get even closer. But if you get closer, you start to close down your field of view, and you're going to lose things. The proper way to adjust is to take maybe a half a step back and set up a little higher to open up your field of view. You're not going to get a perfect view of the outside corner or anything, but you got to get the best you can.
All right, time. All right, check it out. You're listening to the world's first umpire coaching podcast to ever exist in your entire life. Actually, it's the Umpire Coaching Podcast, and we're talking about what is a strike, and we're talking about the strike zone and how to get the best angle on a strike as it goes over the plate. We're talking about the slot. Back to Nick.
And you never want to go to the opposite side of the catcher. That's number one. That's a danger zone for foul balls. They're going to find you out there. If you stay in the slot, chances are it's going to be, I won't say rare, but it's going to be very infrequent that a foul ball might find you there. They're going to go zinging past your ear, and I love it when that happens because it didn't hit me. I'm in a good spot.
You know, I heard somebody say this last season, and it was the first time an umpire had ever said anything to me that it kind of raised an eyebrow. But what are your thoughts on makeup strikes and outs? You've probably seen those.
Yeah, no, you miss it. And trust me, I've missed them. In fact, the one that always comes to mind was the district championship for Major Baseball during the international tournament, i.e. All-Stars. And kid was a left-hander. I'm in the slot. Ball comes, you track as an umpire, you track the ball out of the hand all the way to the glove before making a call. So I see the pitcher start to release the ball, and then the ball disappears. I don't see it. It literally disappears. There's a spot in your retina that basically you can't see, and it went into that spot in my retina, and the ball disappeared. And so I should have done the smart thing, which is the catcher's glove didn't move. I should have called a strike at that point, but I somewhat froze and went ball. And as soon as the words left my mouth, I know that I had totally missed that pitch because it couldn't have been more of a strike. And so I immediately called time, went out and brushed the plate, and the catcher's sitting there, and I go, I totally missed that. And the kid goes, yeah, I don't see it sometimes too.
When I miss a strike or something takes place, my natural instinct is try to set the universe back in correct order. But I had somebody say something sometime early in my umpire career. And what they said was, okay, Darrin, you've made a mistake. Why would you want to make a second mistake now to make up for it? And those words have always stuck with me. So if I miss a strike or I miss an out, my goal is to not continue to make mistakes. So no, I do not believe in making up a pitch or making up an out because of that.
Well, there was a time when I was a spectator that I thought that was primarily what the officials in the sport were doing. You know, you say, well, it's a makeup call. Well, I have found, I mean, let's face it, anyone, you know, one thing that you learn as you do this is we're all volunteers. And the best thing about being a volunteer is when somebody's mother starts yelling at you, you know, I always tend to turn and smile and say, you know, ma'am, I'm a volunteer and you get what you pay for. So, you know, in this case, you make a mistake and you think, oh gosh, you know, that should have been a strike, or I called that a strike and it should have been a ball. Well, you know, every pitch is a new day. And if you, I knew a fellow a long time ago that, you know, said if you try and do that, you're never going to even the score, because if you call something on the borderline to try and even things up, you're just making it worse. You need to be satisfied that you've done the best you can, and we all make mistakes, and you just, you know, you make a mistake, it's like, okay, the mistake's in the past, move forward.
There's another way to look at it. We want the umpire to be accurate. If we just say we want you to be consistent, you're having a bad day, your strike zone's junk, and it's junk for both teams. But that doesn't give you any internal motivation to try to do a better job on that next pitch. So if every pitch we're trying to be accurate, that's going to lead to consistency. Now, as far as calling strikes, when a pitch is thrown, the plate umpire is the only person in the ballpark whose 100% undivided focus is on the path of that baseball. If you've got to think to yourself, boy, that was close, or you're going, I don't know, call that a strike. If it's that close, call it a strike. That's using a full strike zone, or call it an aggressive strike zone, if you will. If you find yourself in a game feeling like you're missing pitches, the thing to do is to bear down and focus. Work on being accurate. Go back to basics. Am I in the right position? Is my head in the right spot? Am I seeing the ball all the way to the catcher's glove? Those kinds of things, but never do a makeup call.
I think that concept comes sometimes from watching games on TV, because I feel I know that this probably doesn't happen at the officiating level, but it does feel like maybe in an NBA game or an NFL game or something like that, where they missed a holding, or they missed a foul or something, and then the next time down it seems like they were a little more liberal, or a little and to right the ship a bit, and then the announcers will say something. You'll hear them talk about like, oh, that seems like a makeup call, or you'll have fans go, oh, that seemed like a makeup call, and I think that's where that kind of stuff starts.
Yeah, I agree with you. The analysts and the play-by-play guys that are on TV, they're not necessarily experts on the rules, and especially if they're ex-players, they've played with an emotional attachment to what's going on the court or on the field, and so that kind of carries with them. Another thing to try to consider, and I think this is a difficult one for fans to consider, is that what you're seeing from the stands, or what you're seeing from the camera angle, is a different view than what the officials are seeing on the court or on the field. It might be perfectly plain that the camera angle, you saw a violation, but the official down on the court was blocked by another player, or whatever occurred on the other side of the player's body that the official can't see. So that's a tough one for people to accept and understand, and give a little, I'll say, benefit of the doubt. But there's no official that I ever knew or ran into that goes out there on the field with the intent of making calls for one team and against another.
What should plate and field umpires be watching for on a check swing? What do you? I know what I look for personally, but curious to know from a training standpoint, what should we be watching for?
This is why normally, and it is an appeal by the home plate umpire, but this is why a lot of times the home plate umpire won't necessarily see the batter attempt to strike at the ball with the bat, and miss, which is the definition of a strike. They'll be tracking the ball all the way to the glove, and they might see some movement, but not enough to convince them. And the catcher should be taught, and the umpire should understand, just point down to the first base umpire. And the furthest, you're possibly going to call it as a base umpire is maybe over behind the second baseman. But anytime you're on the left side of the diamond, unless it's a left-handed batter, you don't really have the best view of the pitch.
I love that question, because you could probably get 7 answers from 7 different umpires. Some will talk about the barrel of the bat meeting the foul ball line. Others will talk about the wrist breaking, things like that. The rule book gives me a very liberal interpretation, and that is, did the batter attempt to hit the ball? So for me, what I'm looking for, it could be as little as just a wave of the bat. I guess depending on how focused I am, how much I'm paying attention, I have a millisecond to determine whether I thought that batter was attempting to hit the ball. It doesn't say anything about, pulling the bat back, retracting the bat and stuff like that. It talks specifically about whether the batter was trying to hit the ball. So you might be a little bit more conservative on that approach. I might be a little bit more liberal on that approach.
It's one of those things. It's like I can't define it, but I know what but it is when I see it.
So let's talk about a scenario where a batter is hit by a pitch. Can you expand on that and tell us when that's a strike and when it is not?
Well, I did say that if the batter is swinging at a pitch and the pitch touches their body, that's going to be a strike. There's another scenario if the batter doesn't swing at the pitch, but the ball is in the strike zone and it strikes the batter, that's going to be a strike. That could be a situation where the batter's crowding the plate, maybe leaning out over the plate. The pitch is actually in the strike zone and it hits the batter. Again, that's going to be time. That's a strike. Batter, you stay here.
Sorry, Nick, for interrupting again. You're listening to the Umpire Coaching Podcast. I'm James with Roger. We're talking to a number of umpires and coaches about baseball. And in this episode, we're talking about what is a strike. We're discussing, we're discussing foul tips. So thank you for listening, and back to Nick.
Foul tip. There's a lot of confusion. If it's a foul, if the pitch becomes a foul tip, that's going to be a strike. If it's strike 3, that's going to be an out. The ball stays live. Now, a lot of people loosely use foul tip and foul ball, but there's a very distinct difference between the two, and it's very important as far as playing action. Because a foul tip stays in play, the ball stays live. We can get outs. Lots of things can happen. So what is a foul tip? A foul tip is when a batted ball goes sharp and direct from the bat and first touches the catcher's glove or bare hand and then is legally caught. So it could tip the catcher's mitt, bounce off his chest protector, fall into his lap, and the catcher catches it, controls it before it touches the ground. That's going to be a foul tip. But if the ball first strikes the catcher's chest protector, then falls in his lap, that's not a foul tip because it did not first touch his glove or hands. That's a foul ball. And it's a foul ball because while the ball was on or over foul territory, it was touched by a player. So that's going to be a foul. Nothing happens. Runners cannot advance. And if it were less than 2 strikes, that'll be a strike.
How would one convey to a plate umpire that they don't like the strike zone? And this is something to do without being obviously tossed out of the game. Or is it even reasonable to convey to an umpire, do you just absolutely forbid it, or what are your thoughts?
Well, the classic one, of course, I've also umpired at the high school level, varsity baseball in my younger years, and now that I'm older and it's a little farther between the bases, I do varsity girls softball. But the main way it's conveyed, and you pretty much know what it is, which is the base coach or the manager will say, not your pitch. I know what they're saying. They know what they're saying. That's pretty much all I'm going to take. If they're gonna basically say that was low, now we've got a problem. And what I normally say when they say something like that was low, is I will say, we're not talking about balls and strikes. And that's as much as I'll say, because the next time they say that was low or something, right, the fact that wasn't a strike, they will remove themselves from the game. I don't eject managers, coaches, and players. They eject themselves.
Exactly. So just so our listeners understand, there is actually a rule in the book about that, about the subjective calls. And it's Rule 9.
Yeah, 902A, an umpire's decision which involves judgment, such as, but not limited to, whether a batted ball is fair or foul, whether a pitch is a strike or a ball, or whether a runner is safe or out, is final. No manager, coach, or player substitute shall object to any judgment calls or judgment decisions. That's pretty much what most people eject themselves with. Another thing is catcher thinks the ball was a strike. Hey, they're looking forward. All I hear out of them is, hey, I thought that caught the corner. Or, they're basically expressing their opinion.
Yeah.
Where they get in trouble is if they stand up and turn around and look at you. And even if they say it's the appearance that they're objecting to your call. And basically you say, hey, stay forward.
And it's one thing, And I'm always able to judge who's going to do that. And almost always it's the guy pregame that comes up to me and asks me what my strike zone is today. That's usually the guy that's going to say something later in the game. That's my.
Now I have trouble controlling my family humor on that because my older brother, who also umpired, his basic response always to that question was, for your team or for the other team? So, yeah, if where's your strike zone? It's in the book. The other thing that is often said during the game is they'll say, if they're on defense, you'll normally hear out of them, hey, where was that pitch? And again, I'll turn to them and say, we're not talking about balls and strikes.
Ultimately, we're out there because we want to get the calls right, and ideally, if you do a good job, you should be as invisible as possible. You're part of the game, but you're not, because of what you're doing. You're not bringing attention to yourself.
I have a feeling that consistency is really key, and I think if you're missing, let's say, 2 balls outside consistently that day for whatever reason, but it's going both ways, and it's going that way through the whole game, the first inning, second inning, fourth inning, sixth inning, whatever, I get less complaints than if sometimes it's a strike and sometimes it's not a strike.
If they're keeping it positive, and I'm not going to take any insult to either one of the comments about a good miss or a good take, things like that. I think it's a manager's job to keep his batters in the game. He's got one of the worst angles on the field other than high-low. He's got a good look at high-low, but he doesn't have a good look at what I call east-west. So as long as they keep those comments non-critical, I'm going to let them do that. Every once in a while, maybe under my breath, if he says good take, but it's right over the heart of the plate, I'm going to kind of mumble under my breath, wow, what are they swinging at if they're not swinging at that one that was just tubed,
Yeah.
But I'm not going to say that out loud where anybody can hear me. But it's like, I'm going to let them do their job. As long as they're respectful, I'm not going to stir the pot, I guess.
Okay, cool.
And I try not to listen to too much of what's going on around me. I've got a game to focus on. I don't work for managers and coaches. I work for players on the field. And so, the coach or the manager may not be happy with what I'm doing, but as long as the attitude on the field stays loose and the kids are having fun.
First of all, if you talk to an umpire and you want to, whichever method you want to think about, but just the act of telling the umpire that his strike zone isn't good. What you're doing is questioning the umpire's judgment. And you go into Rule 9 and it says that you can't talk about or complain about calls that involve umpire judgment. That's one of the 2 things that'll get you tossed out of a game is make your comment personal by using the word you, or question the umpire's judgment. Now, many years ago, we have a friend who umpired with us who doesn't umpire anymore, but he had a situation, I think it was a strike zone, where he was working a plate. Coach came out of the dugout and was made a comment about the strike zone. And this guy asked the coach, are you questioning my judgment? And Einstein said, yeah, I am. Well, guess where he ended up? So some of it will depend on your personal relationship with the individuals. If it's during the regular season, you kind of know each other. I would not object if you just between innings quietly came up and made a comment. I would probably not take offense at that. But if you've been bitching about every pitch from the dugout, you're going to get no mercy from me. And if you're constantly asking your catcher, hey, Billy, where was that pitch? That's the same thing. You're questioning my judgment. And, sometimes you can get the catcher's attention just while you're standing there without talking face to face. Just tell Billy, you better tell him it was outside the zone.
So, Nick, I got a follow-up to that. So, this is maybe something that I've done wrong or what have you, but what is your thoughts on, and I kind of call them like the code, where you have maybe a third base coach or a coach in the dugout, and a pitch comes in, and let's say it's for the pitcher, they're like, and they felt it was a strike, but it was a ball, and they go, good miss, Billy, good miss. or from the third base coach, it was a strike that they felt was a ball or what have you, and they go, good take, J-meeee, good take. What are your thoughts on like those kind of comments?
Those don't bother me. Let's use a situation where the pitch comes in. Maybe there's you got an 0-2 count, and you don't want to throw the ball down the middle of the plate. You actually want to throw the ball a little outside the strike zone and maybe try to get the batter to go fishing. So you ball it, and you hear a comment of, "Hey, great pitch, way to go, Susie, great pitch." Well, that's not a comment on you or your call or trying to tell you, "Hey, that was a strike." From the defensive perspective, that was a great pitch. You didn't want the ball in the strike zone. You wanted the pitcher to throw something to try to get the batter to go fishing after a bad pitch. So that's why those kind of comments don't bother me, unless they start to get excessive. You can kind of tell a difference in the tone of voice, or if it's like after every pitch, then that would be enough to bother me, where I might issue some warnings or something.
So I've been going to a lot of games for my sons playing high school, and then we've done some other baseball, not through Little League. And I've noticed that some of the games that sometimes when umpires have had problems, it was because for lack of communication, either communicating to the field what's going on, whether it's a ball or a strike or a foul ball, what have you, or communicating with their other umpire, their partner. And so I was hoping maybe you could expand or at least give us your thoughts on the importance of the umpire communicating the game to those around them.
I absolutely love that question, and here's why. I was taught from day one, when you go back to the fence, you ignore the spectators. But one thing I've found throughout my career, especially at the high school level, is fans want answers, coaches want answers. Roger, you nailed it when you said communication is key. But oftentimes, if I go back and I pull my water bottle out of the fence and somebody approaches me in a respectful manner and says, "Hey, Blue, I got a question. Can I ask you a question?" And if I've got time and I'm not delaying the game, I'll say, "Yeah, fire away." And they'll ask me, "Well, I've never seen that call before. Can you explain that to me in 30 seconds or less?" And it's like, absolutely, I will. And by the time I'm done, I say it loud enough to where I'm not just answering that individual, but anybody on that side of the field can hear me. And occasionally you'll get this, wow, all these years I've been watching softball, I've never heard that. But now that he's explained it, it kind of brings the tone back into a manageable situation, especially if people haven't heard it and you're getting the cat calls. And it's not our job to put out that fire, but I personally believe that there's nothing wrong with sharing information when you know how to do it, you know how to convey it properly. And the same thing applies to manager. If I have a pitcher who I'm struggling a little bit with the catcher, we all know in Little League, they like to frame the pitch. And by framing it, that they'll take a ball that clearly doesn't come close to meeting the definition of a strike, and they'll pull it back over anywhere near the plate, hoping that you're going to call it a strike. If I have a catcher that's doing that on borderline pitches, I will come up between innings. I'll walk down that side where it is affected by that team, and I'll pull the manager or a coach if necessary and say, "I want you to know something. If you would just get that catcher to catch the ball and not move it, it's more believable for me to call that a strike than it is for waiting for him to pull it back over to the middle of the plate and call it a strike." So you're doing me a disservice when you're teaching him to yank or her yank everything back to the plate. You've told the whole world by teaching your catcher when they catch it out there that it's a ball. So whose mind are you trying to change when you're teaching them to bring it back over the plate? And I show them how to keep the elbow tight and just to move the wrist. I show them little nuances and stuff to benefit them for the future. And hopefully their pitchers and catchers can grab more strikes because of that.
This is our transition question because we're going to bring in some coaches. Do you have any training ideas or thoughts that we can share with the coaches? Now, obviously, I'm going to give them this visual you've given me, but do you have any ideas or thoughts or questions or things that you would convey to coaches so they could better teach these kids and train them to have more successful games?
Well, let's start first with the batter. One of the persons that I worked with over the years in the Little League program, he used to teach his kids, what pitch do you like to hit? How you like it low? You like it high? Do you like it on the inside of the plate? Do you like it on the outside of the plate? Where do you like that pitch? And basically before 2 strikes, he would teach his kids, basically you're only swinging, if you're not up there giving the signal to like hit and run or something. Basically, you're only swinging at that pitch. You like it low and outside, look for a low and outside pitch. It's there, swing the bat. With 2 strikes, anything around the plate. And one of the things he used to do was he'd have the kids get up to the plate. He'd take the ball and start with it so that it was basically over the center of home plate. And he'd basically have the kids stand there. And he'd take that ball and he'd move it out, and he'd ask the kids to tell him when they thought the ball was no longer a strike. And it was normally, for almost all the kids, was when they could no longer hit it. And it was normally 2 balls off the plate before the kids would say, hey, they could no longer hit it. So that's the best thing for training the kids as far, training them to swing the bat. Don't be looking for a walk. You got to work with your catchers to say, hey, move a little bit towards the outside corner, move the glove over. And pitchers normally, as long as they're, not just throwing it anywhere, if they're trying to throw it towards the glove, the fact that the catcher moves it over 1 ball, the ball normally moves over 1 ball. And if that's all they're missing by, that's going to make it a strike. Pay attention to what's happening. And again, for the catchers, teach them not to move the glove.
I really like the comment that you made about how you eliminate the umpire from the game if you're hitting the ball into play. And I mean, that, or at least, you're eliminating the balls and strikes aspect of umpiring because you're actually hitting the ball, which is, it's the object of the game. I would like to think that these 8-year-olds aren't watching Moneyball and trying to be David Justice and, work everybody for a walk. I truly think that we're really fortunate with baseball in that, generally speaking, the stuff that we have to judge happens usually in fairly well-defined areas at fairly well-defined times. And there's a certain amount of advance warning that that's going to be what we need to rule on. I was at a high school basketball game the other night, and I was watching those guys, and I thought, man, you got 3 guys trying to rule over, semi mayhem, and I just marvel at what those guys do, and I think, wow, as a baseball umpire, we've got it so good because generally, especially as the skill levels increase, I was really concerned when I first started umpiring about majors because the action's faster and the players are more skilled. But I discovered that the majors games are probably, I don't want to say better to umpire because the players have a better skill level. The things that you generally expect to happen during a baseball game actually happen in a majors game, a game with a bunch of 10-year-olds.
Don't teach your batters the strike zone. The strike zone is going to change from umpire to umpire. It might change for me from today to tomorrow. Maybe my wife yelled at me for, hey, this is the 6th night this week you're out there on the ball field. When are you going to take me to dinner? So what I suggest the coaches do, teach your players pitches that they can hit. They may not necessarily be in the strike zone, but if they can hit it and they can hit it well, just swing at it. Don't worry about what the umpire is going to call.
Awesome. Just awesome. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming by today. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Brent. Thanks, Greg. And thank you, Darrin, for your input as we discuss what is a strike. The name of the podcast is Umpire Coaching. The name of the website is umpirecoaching.com. Let's talk about the coaching side a little bit. I've got a couple of gentlemen here who are active coaches. They coach 12U, youth baseball, and we're going to ask them what their thoughts are, and not only discussing what is a strike with their players, but how does one coach children so they can take advantage of the rules We'll start with introductions. Rich, would you please introduce yourself?
I'm on year 7 of coaching Little League. That's following my oldest son from T-ball all the way up to his 12-year-old year now into majors, which, as we all know, is the highlight of a Little Leaguer's career.
And Erik, if you could please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi guys. I too started coaching my oldest when he started T-ball about 6-7 years ago, and am also now coaching in majors. And I coached high school baseball for 4 or 5 years before that. So
Okay, what is a strike? And specifically for coaches is, we're going to talk about the strike zone. How do you guys teach the strike zone to your players? And I mean younger kids and older kids.
I think until recently, it was really just, for me, knees to armpits. I didn't really think of it as I do now, but it was always just knees to armpits was a strike, anything over the plate.
So, Rich, your thoughts?
Yeah, as the kids have grown into their older, been around the block a few times themselves, and I think Erik and I have coached together for a lot of these years that we've mentioned, but so I think that's helpful in starting with your stance, starting with, and not to move away from the zone, but your hitting stance more or less determines that. It's real hard to hit a ball when you're bent over at the waist and you think your strike zone is now a foot by a foot. And the best hitting stance that we teach obviously is not that. So you have the opportunity to hit a ball a little higher, hit the ball a little lower, and control it as a batter as best you can.
So, what are some good hitting drills that you guys do, different methods and techniques that you teach for hitting the inside, outside, low and high pitches successfully?
Yeah, I think soft toss is one that we've both used over the last couple of years to try to teach kids to hit those inside and outside pitches. And I think just those soft toss is the place that we've taught inside, outside pitches. But a lot of the time when the kids don't see it coming right over the heart of the plate, they let that ball go. So this year, that's something I've been thinking about specifically as the kids are getting into that 12-year-old age of majors, really teaching our pitchers to hit that outside corner. At least with our hitters, these last couple of years, I see them just watching those pitches because they're being selective.
Yeah, the outside pitch is the hardest. And I think from a coaching perspective, from a hitting perspective, and from an umpire perspective, that outside pitch, I've really learned and watched how umpires call it. But gearing towards what you asked, specifically the drills you've used, as I've reflected over the years, and we really started doing it last year a lot more, doesn't matter what age. I think one of the most underrated tools is a tee. You can put a tee out front and inside, so you're going to pull that ball. You can put a tee outside and down and away, and you're going to hit it the other way. Put it in the middle. It's just so versatile to get you to, okay, that's where that ball is. Get my hands through quick and pull the inside pitch. Instead of trying to pull an outside pitch, go with it. Because if you pull it, it's going to the shortstop. It's a ground ball every time.
So I just wanted to, because I coached for 15 years myself, and I completely agree with what you guys are talking about. The majors use the tee, and I had a dad yell at me one year because I was, what are you having these kids play t-ball for? They're 12. And I said, exactly, because we can control that where that tee is. And my hope is coaches today are teaching the kids to hit the ball while it's out front and not wait until it crosses the plate. You want that ball so you can pull your hips on it. You want that thing out front. That tee is where you're going to teach them that, to really get them focused on getting that hip turn as they're meeting that ball out front.
Like, I agree with Rich. We have done the tee because they're all valuable. And I think the tee without the weight distribution, if they're not getting the weight back on the back foot and then driving through to hit it out front, they don't have any power if they're trying to hit the ball outside. And so it kind of all works together. That balance is really important. Teaching kids balance, teaching kids to not squish the bug. God, I hate that one. But if they transfer the weight from the back to the front and they do it just at the right time, to kind of systematically do that so that they can see when they're not doing something, for them to do that when there's a strike coming across, or even,
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to get anybody to turn on a ball that's super outside or super inside. And so we've always believed, the guys I've coached with, is, that's just not your pitch. And pitch selection super critical, and that's a lot where soft toss comes in. That's a lot where a lot of these other drills So on defense, and I'm talking mostly with catchers, what techniques are you guys teaching? Are you interested in teaching catchers to work with the umpire to get the best strike zone possible? Do you guys have any thoughts on that, or have you come across anything like that? This is, of course, the defense side.
I think a lot of it is there's two sides of this, at least that I see. I think there's a personality factor. You know, we have one catcher that he's just a jokester. He talks to the batters, he talks to the umpire, he won't stop talking. And it's interesting because he's the one that we've coached, Erik and I have coached the most, that really listens to what you try and teach and then implements it. And it's the hardest thing for catchers at a young age. But to be able to frame a ball and hold it there and give the umpire an opportunity, and especially little league umpires that are, you know, they want to make a quick decision. And if you get that ball, it's in the glove and you move the hand, and now it's like, that was close. Was it there or was it not? Really hold it there and frame it, even if it's not over the plate, even if it's an inch or two, 3 balls outside, you know, give them an opportunity to make a call on it, and that may go your way. And
Erik, do you have anything to add to that?
I think the way Rich and I coach is every kid plays every position. So we have, you know, we move them around. There's no reason to pigeonhole a kid in at 10, 11, 12 years old that, oh, you're a pitcher only, or, oh, you're an infielder, or, oh, you're a kid wants to catch. We're going to have that kid catch, you know, and then you get to All-Stars, and it's a little bit different. But I recognize that when we got to the All-Star season this year, we hadn't been, you know, a pitcher gets 0-2 on a batter, and our catcher is holding the glove dead center over the heart of the plate, which is exactly where he shouldn't be. And we're like, oh my gosh, you know, did we not? Oh no, oh wait, this is a new catcher. Well, then we get to All-Stars, and we're like, no, it's not a new catcher. This is one of our All-Star catchers, and climb the ladder, you know, or just teaching him where to set up so that he's not just giving him a can of corn on an 0-2 pitch. And I think that's going to be a big one this year for all of our kids because, you know, I mean, every kid wants to pitch. Not every kid wants to catch, but I think every kid should catch, and we can teach them those things. If you're behind 2 balls and no strikes, maybe you do have to, you know, all right, pitcher, right here, just hit my glove. But if we're teaching them to hit the glove every time and that catcher's setting up in different locations, I think we're going to be, I mean, we were really successful with it in All-Stars this year once we made that adjustment and talked to our catchers about it. And I think this year going forward, it's just going to be something that I recognize last year that we'll be better at.
Rich?
I think defensively, that's where you're strong. You can get your catcher to, I mean, he's the chief of the infield. And if he realizes that rather than just I'm the one catching the pitches, but I'm the one telling the pitcher where to pitch it, then your pitcher has more than, oh, I'm just trying to throw a strike. No, I'm trying to hit that glove.
Yeah, that's a good summary. Working with them on the counts is important. And like Erik said, we did focus on that, especially late regular season, all the way through All-Stars, and it helped. It absolutely tremendously helped. Unfortunately, this year we were missing one of our starting majors catcher to an injury. But we did some good things with the kids that had done it during the season. I think the communication with the umpire, I kind of touched on it, joking batters and regular season is one thing, gets more serious in All-Star times. They can be on your side or they can't, meaning they'll work with you more. They'll teach you more during the games and the regular seasons if you can open that communication with them, and which is hard for kids, right? I mean, they're 10, 11, 12-year-olds. They're not going to have conversations with adults or other coaches. And umpiring that I've done, it's interesting to hear what those young kids say and what they're doing when their buddy comes up to the plate and they're chattering back and forth, playing against each other. And it's just, Erik said, you know, you control the infield, but it's more than that. I think for me, umpiring behind the plate has brought that out even more, how important that position is. As a person that has never played catcher, coach put me in there. I think I was 13 in a practice that lasted about 5 pitches. I was out.
So this is a note that was passed overwhelmingly. All 4 umpires that I interviewed wished me to communicate this to you and all coaches. They are saying if a catcher is framing a pitch, it is telling everybody on the field and many people in the stands what they think the pitch was. which is fine. But these umpires that I spoke with, and I would recommend this, and something just to consider and think about. Sometimes a ball comes in and it is a strike, and the umpire sees it as a strike, but the catcher frames it. Now we have a hard. Did the catcher not believe it was a strike? What they're recommending. Let the glove stay where it is. They all agreed. Let's set up the catcher in different slots each time.
Well, I think you're using the term framed. Like if a ball's on the outside corner, I'm teaching that kid to catch it and hold it. We're not trying to teach them to move it from far outside to swing it and move it a foot or something like that. But the kid that catches one right over the heart of the plate and then drops it down between their legs isn't even holding it there or framing it for the umpire to see that it was a strike. And the kid that is falling away as he catches that pitch on the outside corner, but he's leaning and he keeps going, we're teaching them to hold it there, not teaching them to bring it in. We're just trying to teach them not to fall. And so again, it's that balance thing, if they could get better at balance so that they can move half of their body out there where the pitch is because their body follows their eyes. Like Rich said, they're 10, 11, 12-year-old kids, and they don't think that they should be doing balance drills at baseball practice. They don't take those very seriously. They get to high school, and their high school coach is going to tell them to do those balance drills. So
what we're addressing here is you just nailed it, Erik. It's one thing to hold the glove in one position. It's another thing to move it a foot, turn around and look at the umpire. That's framing. And what they're recommending is
I think a true definition of a frame, like where framing came from, is it's the frame of a picture. So if you're catching a ball on a corner, your glove is up wide and it's in that top corner, all you're doing is snapping and holding it there and bringing it, like keeping it inside the frame. So I think we have the little league definition of a bad coach or a coach that doesn't know who's catching a ball 3 feet outside and the kid is being taught to bring it inside the zone. And that's not what we're teaching our kids. And I think that we're loosely using this definition of framing. And, I agree with the other umpires that are saying don't have the kid move it from the dirt up to hold it like it looked like it was a strike when it bounced in. But
that's where Erik and I are aligned in our coaching in many ways, is exactly what he just said.
So question for you guys is, who on the field is supposed to appeal to the umpire on the check swing?
Umpire? The coach, catcher.
Typically, we want the catcher to appeal to the plate umpire to ask, did he go? Most umpires who are behind the plate who are paying attention will appeal that anyway. With all the things that we're supposed to do back there, catching a check swing out front may not be something we can readily get to, but our partners can. We want to get it right, but typically what we used to do as coaches and managers is we'd shout out to the catcher, hey, appeal that or whatever.
Yeah, I'm kind of hearing two different things there. Operationally, I go to my catcher because my catcher most of the time, being 10, 11, 12, doesn't think to go there and ask or appeal that.
And so, you can coach or shout out to your catcher. That's what I'm talking about. Shout out to your catcher and ask him to appeal it.
Agreed. It should come from the catcher.
Some kids that are on the ball that maybe have caught more than others will figure that one out. So the last question, and then I've got to wrap up. Whether you're on defense or offense, how would you go about indicating to an umpire that you do not like their strike zone without getting thrown out of a game? What has worked for you guys in the past?
Don't talk about it. I don't feel that on the field is a place to discuss an umpire's strike zone. I think we in our little league are in a special place that we have representation on our board, coaches and umpires. I think we are also adults and can have a conversation about it. And as an umpire, James, you and I have had a conversation about a certain pitch and it worked. It's not a matter of liking it or not. It's about, it goes back to your title, right? What is a strike?
Yep.
In my opinion, you're not going to get anywhere during a game talking about a strike zone.
I like that. And there are some suggestions that I'll share as soon as we hear from Erik on this, because there are some really positive things that we can do.
I've always had the philosophy that your job as a hitter is to hit the ball. One of the years that I was coaching, we had swing the bat or don't pick it up. If you get called out watching an outside corner pitch and you're like, but it was a ball, your job up there as a batter is to hit that ball and hit it opposite field. So if it's outside, so far outside, or it almost hits you in the head and it gets called a strike, I mean, that doesn't happen. So I always teach the kids to be aggressive, that if it's close enough, hey, next time, don't watch that pitch. Practice hitting that outside corner. Swing the bat or don't pick it up. Hit that ball and hit it hard and hit it far. If you're aggressive and you have that attitude, good things will happen. If you're looking for the walk, then kids get disappointed. But again, like we've all said, they're 9, 10, 11-year-old kids. So it's hard to teach them. And I honestly think this year, at the beginning of the year, I'm going to go through and we're going to have a conversation around home plate and talk about the cubic space that is the strike zone, and that a ball can come in with a right-handed pitcher at an angle and barely touch the front corner of that cubic space, and the catcher can catch it a foot outside. If the umpire is watching this space and it comes across that, it sure might have been a strike. And the kids are watching this. If they're watching Major League Baseball, they're seeing it on TV, on ESPN, on ABC, where they're showing the ball come across the zone, and our balls are coming a lot slower and from a pitcher that's closer. So it's hard. It's hard as an umpire to make that call and try to make that call consistently. So if we're talking about what a strike is, as an umpire, all you can do is be consistent. If you're always calling that outside pitch a strike, then both teams have to adjust. It's right on the corner and it's never a strike, then kids might sit there and watch it. But I hope that the kids that Rich and I are coaching are being aggressive and working on hitting that outside pitch so that they're successful at the plate.
Here's the reality too. At this age group, you got half your team that can take that outside pitch and do something with it, whether it's foul it off, put it into play. And the other half of the team, the skills and abilities across the board are so varied and so different that, like Erik said, be aggressive. If it's close, do something with it. Don't leave any doubt.
As we're having this conversation, it's like, if you have a pitcher that can just hit the glove, then if you know that he's not swinging at it, hang out on that outside corner when you get 2 strikes on him. Don't have any catcher just sit there, can of corn, giving him something to hit.
So this is the reason when I was running it as a manager, they'd always, I'd get calls from my coaches or parents in the morning, like at 10 o'clock in the morning on game day. And they're like, well, who are you throwing today? And I'd have 3 kids in mind, but you can't know you can't program who you're going to throw till you get to the field and you see which kids are awake. And the kid you were starting, maybe he had a rough day at school and his head's not there. You can't know till everybody's there. And then the other thing that's valuable is if I'm coming, or somebody else is coming, that I like the outside strike, and that Johnny can camp on that outside strike all day long. Well, you know what? That's a strategy that's valuable to just know who's umpiring. The other thing I wanted to mention is the Hall of Famers failed 2/3 of the time. Could you imagine a baseball game with an umpire failing 2/3 of the time? That'd be no fun at all. We see 200, 300, 400 pitches in a game, and we're human beings too. We might blow 5 or 10. Well, that still gets you at a 95% plus game. To me, that sounds like a pretty good baseball game, don't you guys think?
Sure. Yeah. Totally.
So this is what the umpires had asked me to, that they're okay with, is if you're keeping it positive, so long as you're not coming up to an umpire and saying, hey, I really don't like your zone today or anything like that. That makes it personal. But if you shout to Johnny, he doesn't swing and gets the call, shout to Johnny, hey, good miss, Johnny. That's okay. You didn't want that one. Or good take. Most umpires, some of them might not appreciate that, but most of the ones I've talked to have said, hey, you know what? That's a positive thing to say to that youngster. And it also is a code to the umpire that, maybe he needs or she needs to go back to their basics and make sure that they're in position correctly. But we're going to miss some. Not a lot, but we will. That's just the nature of the game. But most of them wanted me to pass down is to say, hey, look, it's okay to say to the batter, good miss, John. That wasn't your pitch.
Absolutely. Every day. I've learned this one from Erik a lot. It's not yours. Next pitch. Drop a fly ball. Next pitch. Miss a ground ball. Next pitch. You got another opportunity to turn around the muff that you just made into a stellar play.
Umpires do that too. One of the questions I asked the guys was, what are your thoughts on makeup balls and strikes and outs? In other words, I blew that one, so I better call this next one a strike to even it out. I got some very interesting replies. I bet maybe you guys have wondered that in some of your games. It's like, wow, is that a makeup? The answer across the board is never. We don't do that. What we do is listen to what people are saying, and we're taught some basics.
And I think we're all human too. So like if then you called it one way and then another one's close and you think that maybe you made a mistake on the last one or you're second guessing yourself, I think it's only natural that we've tagged it as a makeup call or whatever, but I think it's human nature. No umpire's out there trying to win the game for one team over the other. So I think as long as we have that mentality that like, I feel like Rich and I've had that conversation on the dugout before too. It's not like it's a makeup call. It's like, we're not talking about you, but if some other umpire that you think he may be second guessing that last call that he made, I mean, we're all human. And so we do things to try to even things out when we're in a position of power and authority over little kids' games. So I don't name it, call it what we want, but I think we're all just trying to have a fair game where the kids have fun.
And that's what it's about. It's the fun. And the people who aren't having fun at a Little League game, as you guys know, get invited to leave. And that's probably a good idea. And Rich nailed it, is even umpires too are thinking, okay, next pitch. That's the best we can do. So before we wrap up, I've just got one more thing, and I was curious, do you think of the questions we've discussed that there's anything that was missed or anything you'd like to add with regard to the strike zone, what the strike is, coaching hitters and defense?
Yeah, keep the parents quiet. Tell them to shut up. They're not helping when they're in an umpire's ear. And that's hard because when you're a parent and you're standing there, you've got an opinion too. But parents need to be told that by, not by the umpire, because at that point it probably has already gotten out of hand if the umpire is having to tell the parents, to stop. Anyway, what were you going to say, Rich?
Add to the makeup call. It's interesting, and I don't think there's an umpire out there that wants to visibly affect outcomes of calls. I'm 100% guilty of it. A call that went against us, and then the next call that goes for us, turning to my coaches and say, like, we didn't deserve that. It gets your head thinking. It really does. It's human nature. It's hard not to.
That's good stuff. And then
we are all coaches and stand in that position as umpires also in our volunteer time. And the impact of the call sometimes that, that outside pitch that if I were a pitcher, I want that pitch. That's strike three. But man, it was just, those are hard to swallow as coaches. And so then they become or come across as personal, or like our season ended this last year, our all-star season ended on a questionable call, had an impact. And so unless you're like absolutely 100%, and it was like, well, it could have gone either way. Well, if you're ending, and so sometimes I think that us umpires have to, unless you really know, sometimes you got to let it go the other way if you're not 100% confident of something. And that's hard too. So it's easy to say as a coach when you're not the one making that call. Sure. Yeah. Until you're the one in those shoes. And then you're like, I don't know, it wasn't me. That's a hard call to make. I'm glad I didn't have to make it. Would have liked to play one more game of baseball though. So anyway. Yep.
Well, I mean, and that's tough. I've been there with the tears. We worked so hard to get there, and then things just didn't go our way. And I've been there. I've been with the hugs and the mad parents and the crying kids and all of that. And it's not fun. It's not a.
Well, sometimes those conversations when you have them later though, it's like, well, you really got to teach your kids this. And I'm like, well, actually, no. Please don't use an umpire call as you should be teaching your kids this. You know what I mean? Like from a coaching standpoint, it's like, let's make sure that we are just sticking to the rules here, And so that's where, for me this year, as Rich and I have talked a lot about this upcoming year, like, man, I'm all about that cubic airspace, right? Like if a ball crosses into that cubic, getting all the way back to your point of this conversation was not just, hey, that was a ball outside or inside or high, but like really being certain on, all right, this is what the zone is for this kid. And front to back of the plate, left to right of the plate, it's got to touch something, even if it's just a little bit of the ball, and most of the ball's outside. But I think about that, at least in my own umpiring. And, you do a really good job, James, when you do our umpire clinic of teaching us new things. And I think that's one that I would add this year as far as like this cubic space here, and that the ball's got to touch some of that somewhere, some portion of it as it comes across. I mean, for me, it's made things like super crystal clear, about what I will accept from as a ball or a strike.
Rich?
Maybe in minors a little bit different. That bigger bubble, bigger cubic space.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd add anything,
Okay.
but as the coach, parent of a pretty good baseball player, talking about that pitch, talking about that strike zone, and knowing that he can take an outside pitch and two hop the fence if he wants to. He's got a tendency not to swing at that outside pitch. A good eye, a good player, they know the zone. They really do. And it's hard not to listen to them. And then you got to pull them out of their little funk because they didn't swing at that outside pitch. It was called a strike.
So a couple of thoughts with that on training aspect is one of the things that we always did is I had some signals that I'd give our batters to either move up in the box or move back in the box or move closer to the plate. It's amazing just those small adjustments, what it'll do to a kid's his ability to hit it, or her ability to hit it, but it changes the perspective. If they're up in the box a bit and that ball really is scooting on that outside corner, they'll see it different up in the box than they will camping out by the catcher, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we've always taught, and there's other things you can do when they get a little bit older, not necessarily J-meeee style, but there are things they can do to adjust. But we don't really need to do that at, maybe when they get into juniors or or high school. That's when they get a little bit more command of their motor skills. There are some adjustments that can be made just by where they're standing, as far as getting to that outside pitch or the inside pitch, for that matter.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
For sure. So I just wanted to hit on that aspect. Well, first of all, I want to thank all of the umpires that participated with us today. To them to take the time out of their busy lives and schedules to help me with this podcast so we can really help educate the masses out there and get them to understand. What do you think, Roger? Isn't that pretty cool that they showed up and helped out?
Oh yeah, this has been real good. Learning experience for me and for anybody.
Yeah, no, it's been super cool to have everybody here and then be able to pull in some coaches and get their take on some of these situations. Just awesome. So I want to be sure that Brent and Darrin and Greg and Nick are thanked for their time. Thank you, gentlemen. And then I want to thank Erik and Rich for their contributions too. And then, of course, Roger, throughout this whole thing, even when I came to you with this idea 6 months ago, you've supported me and helped me make this thing as good as it can be. So thank you very much, Roger.
Oh, you're welcome. This is a fun experience.
Yeah, so we've got more podcasts coming. Please stay tuned. They'll be out soon. Our hope is to get at least 6 or 10 out by the end of this year's spring baseball season. So that's the goal. Hopefully we get there. So here's your disclaimer. The rules and opinions discussed here are personal interpretations from seasoned umpires and coaches. The podcast is not directly endorsed, nor are we compensated by any youth sports body, including Little League Baseball. Actual applications of these rules and coaching ideas may vary depending on your location or your league's official rules. So please discuss those with your local umpire chiefs and league presidents. And that's always a good idea. You might want to talk to the people that know about the rules before you start just doing them yourself. That's why we're doing this. So anyway, thank you so much again, Roger. Thanks for your help. And we'll see you next time.
See ya.